Greetings to the friends of Selalelo. My name is Marapelo Letebele, your host, all the way from Botswana in Mankodi. Today I have a very special guest with me, Mr. Keineetse Daniel Keineetse. Mr. Keineetse, I've known him since I was a much younger girl in the journalism space in Botswana, but he's much more than that. He is a thought leader in the community, in the field of politics and social commentator, journalist, writer, teacher, farmer, and a lot more. But before we go any further, I'd like him to introduce himself, situate himself, to understand what shaped his views, his perspectives in life.
Yeah.
Mr. Keineetse.
Thank you, Mayor. I would be humbled to say that the accolades that I'm receiving for any of my life's activities are not really due to me. They are due to my teachers, because I had the luck to be instructed by very many people. First, my primary school teachers, or even before my primary school teachers, my mother and my grandmother were my key teachers who taught me things from social intercourse to history, to identity itself. So yes, I am what I am, but I'm thankful to the teachers that I had.
So where have you been? Where has this world taken you?
For life experience, I've done just about everything. I started off thinking that I was an academic. So I put 50 years of my life in academia, but academia never accepted me for its own reasons, though I have never really failed a course in school to discontinue. But for some reason, I couldn't get up front and be the instructor or the lecturer that I had hoped to be. Instead, I was taught by the street. I picked my journalism from the street, from having quit unceremoniously a post as a teacher. But since the day I entered the newsroom up till today, I've never looked back. I do teach students under a tree, but I teach society in columns.
Writing in columns, you mean?
Yes.
Okay, yes. When I was a much younger journalist, I used to see your name in the papers all the time, and I never really met you until today, which is kind of an interesting thing in itself. Yeah. So can you tell us about how you grew up and what really shaped you?
I was grown up like all boys of my day. For instance, I went to school when I was 6 years old. I remember that because it was in 1966 when this country became independent. So I can even claim to have seen it all. Selalelo was such a dominant figure that we, the children, thought of him as a god. That was our first mistake, because we would make other judgments after that one based on that assumption. My first years were as a head boy, initially to look after kids and cows at the place where we kept our animals, and then to help scare the birds when it was time for plowing. So those were the things that engaged us when we were young. But as we grew, so our responsibilities were increased. We started heading goats in the main, and cattle. And that's when I was in the company of my grandfather, the man whose name I proudly wear. Keineetse is a reference to him. He was called Keineetse. He was a farmer and a herbalist. He was given these herbs by God to administer to his people, not for profit. So that most people were calling us long after our grandfather was dead to ask us to go and collect the dues that they ought to have paid but never paid, because he would say, I don't ask payment. When this child is grown and is a man or a woman, they'll come and pay me for the service I'm doing today.
People in Botswana would know you as a prominent figure in opposition politics, because you are a long-time associate of Dr. Kenneth Goma and other great men like him. Can you just take a minute to just let us know that part of your life?
That's the most interesting part of my life and the richest aspect, I think. I came to know Dr. Goma when he was an unspeakable quantity, at least according to the morality of the day. For instance, the day I was publicly seen shaking Goma's hand, people told my mother about that meeting which took place in the shopping center And by the time I got home, my mother already knew whose company I had kept. And she had prepared a punishment for me already, because Koma was thought of as bad influence. Why was such an adult as him keeping company of us much younger people than him? And the fact that he was not officially married to anybody, they knew. They thought if we followed him, we'll follow all his bad vices. And marriage then was such a thing in our society.
Why was Dr. Goma such a pariah in Botswana society? Because I knew him to be one as a child.
He was clever. That was why. And he was in a modernist world where most of our parents had never been. So he was scary.
That is the man who studied in the USSR.
Goma studied in many places.
Yes.
He studied in Sorbonne, for instance, in France. He studied in The Hague, for instance. He studied in Prague, for instance, where he was getting degrees in all these places. And he was also all the time involved with student unions and student leadership of Africa of the day.
Do you know how he was able to go through that path, the end? Why it brought him so much consternation in his home country, Botswana?
Goma was an extremely gifted person, gifted in a lot of ways. He came from a rich family, a family that is close actually in its relationship to the ruling dynasties of Botswana. But Goma chose to be a povo, an ordinary man, when he was thought of as somebody who should accept power and more power. He chose to be just a simpleton.
What attracted you to him?
His politics. I had read the first 2 years of my high school, I came across a pamphlet. Some student had brought a pamphlet called Pamphlet Number 1. And it caught our imagination so completely that within a term, this pamphlet has circulated through 5 dormitories, from Block A, Block B, Block D, Block C, Block E. We all were familiar with the contents of that pamphlet. But what did the pamphlet promise us? It promised us a socialist republic of equal citizens.
Why do you think that was so heinous and provocative to the Botswana government?
To start with, Seretse came on at the same time as the likes of Kwame Osaye-Nkrumah, Nkrumah, men who were dedicated to the concept of total African liberation. Seretse was not that. Seretse was a compromiser, especially his marriage to Lady Ruth Khama made him a pawn of the British colonialism.
Okay, you are a Mungwatu tribesman,
Yeah.
and Seretse Khama was your traditional chief.
Yeah.
How was being at odds with him affect your life?
You ask an interesting question. I was actually beaten up on the occasion of his death. I came home, I knew what had happened. I knew that my mother was going to daily prayers at Kota. But on the day that he passed on, I feigned ignorance. I came home blowing my whistle, as it's normal. So when I got home, I found my mother in a state of grief. And I could tell what had happened. And I said, before she told me, it cannot be that Seretse is dead. You were going to Kota every day to pray for God, to God not to take his life. How would he go then? That provoked my mother, who lifted up the lid of a boiling pot, threw it at me. I was just 2 steps too lucky to escape getting both my legs cut from that misery.
Oh, our mothers. Whose mother didn't love the ruling aristocracy from Serowe in Botswana?
I have to put a context to it. Seretse was, for our mother's generation, a revolutionary. Only we didn't understand that kind of revolution. But he was a revolutionary. He was rebelling against an uncle, Tsegeli Khama. Tsegeli Khama was then the last representative of the rule of the father. So for their generation, anybody that stood up against that which was established, they were anti-establishment. And in that small world, they were revolutionary.
Do you know that my grandmother was from Tonota? and you may or may not know this, but there was some serious tribal tensions between the Bakuruti of Tonota and Bangwatu, to a point where the ruling ward of the Bakuruti in Tonota was actually uprooted and taken to Serowe so that they could keep an eye on them during Tsekede's time. And a new chief was just installed without the people's approval or whatever, just because obviously they were in his land. Yes. So I understand that he was I remember my grandmother, I once dropped on my grandmother and some people talking about what a horrible man Tsekedi Kama was. But to others, he was obviously a very intelligent person who was seen as, you know, the quintessential
revolutionary.
Yeah.
No, Tsekedi had many images depending on who was talking about him. I hold him in great admiration, even against my own self. Literature has misrepresented most of his angst. For instance, when it became clear that Seretse had to clear himself through his office in order for him to wield the power that he came to wield, then the colonialists cleverly came round to creating a new narrative that actually Tsekedi was sitting there in the chair that was meant to be Seretse's in defiance of tradition. That was never the case. All the time, Tsekedi knew he was a caretaker, and a caretaker role that had to end someday.
It took 58 years for us to have a change in government in Botswana. Basically, we raised 2 generations of the same
3
ruling class. And can you just tell us, what have we learned from, I'm sorry to go back to Dr. Koma, but Dr. Koma's legacy and the fact that now with the party that he helped to start
is finally
now in power. Yeah.
Well, the point that must be understood by anybody questioning Dr. Koma, his role and his influence in the national politics, must start from the understanding that Koma did not start a party so he wins a government. Koma started a party so that he would ignite a rise of consciousness. He was clear that consciousness rises over a very long time and very slowly. He said to me, there's a moment in history when the people stop on their tracks to ask themselves if all they have done before was proper and correct. And when they get to that moment, he said, they cross the threshold. They move on to being new people. They discard all that is old and take on everything that is new. That, he said, was a revolutionary moment. And that after the teachings, after the many years have elapsed, Botswana would reach that. And they did. Let me illustrate. When Koma came in, Botswana's way of greeting each other was Dumela Mongwami, which meant hello or greetings, my owner. By the time Koma passed on, every Botswana was greeting each other in the following way: Dumela comrade. That was for me a testifying moment.
Comrade used to be a very offensive term in Botswana for the ruling class, or the people who did not have the consciousness that Dr. Koma tried to cultivate. But anyway, what do you think about this new political change? Just 1 minute.
It's only a change insofar as it will introduce a change of the face on the currency, not anything more. It is what they call cosmetic, because the party that's ruling, if you want to describe it by any known political pedigree, it is a bourgeois party. I'm not inventing this term or description for it. It was invented by its chief friend, Dr. General Ian Khama, who once said in his time of rule that when he came into government, there was only one party that he feared, and that was the BNF, which is now, quote unquote, the party in government. He said he'd stopped fearing that party because the new leader of that party, what is his name again? The advocate, Gideon Duma Boko, has turned it into a bourgeois party, so Ian Khama had nothing to fear.
So what do you mean bourgeois? Can you just...
Right. We had labored for a socialist republic of equal citizens, equal by the law, by economy, by culture, and all. But this one, the bourgeois type, is one that encourages the rule of privilege. Those who have all. Those who don't have their nothingness.
Were you a functional member of the Botswana National Front, the political party?
I don't know functional, but I was never in the central committee, but I was always doing the work of the party. I was, for instance, the publisher of both party publications. I was the last editor of the Clarion Call, which is a special socialist publication, but I was also the editor and the collator of the normal Puopa.
I associate with an organization called Movement in Omaha for Racial Equity. I guess its name is self-explanatory. Now, the folks in America are trying to extend their reach to the African continent because we know that Black people are by far the most affected by racism in the world. And even though we may not have racism in Botswana, do you think that there is any impetus for Africans in Africa to try to, at least in any way, help other Africans who are in dire straits? We know that that is really going to happen because we have an overtly racist president in the United States, for instance. Do you think Africans should care about that at all?
Africa must feel guilty for the African diaspora, to start with. There was no slave trade without the participation of Africans. Whatever their role in their local societies were, we are guilty for having helped that capture and transportation of our own Black brothers. And therefore, today we are challenged, even by our own conscience, to prepare in our minds room for those that we threw away in case they just want to come back. Also because we know the world doesn't accept a Black person anywhere because Black people are specific to Africa.
Do you think Black people have a table at the white man's economic
we
systems?
We don't. We come to the table as hewers of wood and drawers of water. They are happy when we bring the mineral wealth from our soils to their tables. The produce, agricultural and otherwise, raw materials, you name them. They are happy to receive that. But they are not happy to host an African community within their bosom because Africans are dynamic. Wherever they go, they will soon take over some aspect of society and run with it.
Okay. So what do you think of America's declaration and actually action to cut foreign aid?
I'm happy for it, actually, against what the other people think. We have not developed our own systems because we are counting on aid. We are selling our highly priced goods for less than the price because we are getting that aid. So let them keep their aid and let us sell the diamond and the gold for its proper price. We will not need the aid.
Yeah. Now, can we talk about regional integration?
Yes.
In the beginning, there was a dream of African unity. We know that it's been over, 60 years or so, and nothing has happened. And maybe we could try small first with regional integration. How do you think that's working out?
Well, you see, when you talk unity from the high podiums, you are talking government to government. The governments themselves don't want that unity because the system of colonialism has broken up the big pie into smaller manageable parts for local tyrants to run. Whereas the people on the ground, the people in Ramokhwebana, this side of the river and that side of the river, they are aunts and cousins and they are united at the village level. We then make trouble for them when we come asking passport and national identity cards, because then immediately they have to be either Zimbabwean or Botswana. Whereas in their social life, they are just people, both sides of the border. So we could take it from that level of association of families living together and then extend it to our nations, because nations are also derived from families.
So the whole point of this interview is not for it to be an interrogation. It's a little bit of a conversation between you and me.
Yeah.
And there's this idea that I have been propagating through this program. And obviously I'm not the originator of the thought, but it has come to me in the way that it has.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily echo anybody else's viewpoint.
Yeah.
But I am a history enthusiast myself, where I've actually taken the trouble to try to really understand why things are the way they are in Botswana and Southern Africa. And for the most part, I mean, I've read all the
curriculum.
All curriculum. I've read all sorts of things. And I obviously now I'm a different person because I see things that nobody else is talking about. And one of the things that really worry me as a woman who is a Botswana citizen is that I realize that there'll never be any African unity. Because in addition to the fact that we know that all these presidents of these African countries, there's also a problem of the past where we used to have tribal warfare and none of the things have been resolved. This is an idea. So, for instance, we know that exactly 200 years ago in 1823, the people who now inhabit a certain part of Zimbabwe, who are called Matebele, they went through
Botswana,
what is now Botswana,
and ravaged the country.
And we know that some Botswana are still very
touchy
about that. But we are trying to talk about unity without first trying to heal the wounds.
Yeah.
And I've often thought, if we ever get an opportunity, I think it would be best if we had some kind of a truth and reconciliation type thing where we actually forgive each other. We talk about things, we know what happened.
That's a very key point you are raising, but
Yes.
this is my intervention on it. We Africans generally are now looking at the West and expecting reparations from them for the crimes they committed historically.
Yeah.
Now, if we can genuinely expect that, we would rather be served by ourselves looking at our earlier history and say what of it needs remedy.
Yeah.
Because if you read, for instance, the history or the stories, the narratives that have been written about Matebele warfare, I'll refer you to a beautiful book by the then General Secretary of the ANC, a man called Solomon Tsekiso Plaki. He's written a beautiful epic called Muhudi.
Yeah. I heard
Now, if you read Muhudi, you are not likely to be friends with the Ndebelis.
Yeah.
But going beyond the sensational part, I'm trying to say history is created by people, often for a purpose. It is like identity. And the people who create history, they always have history on their side. So we cannot trust only on the histories that our parents gave us. We have to go beyond and hear what our opponents' parents were giving to their children as history. And when we have the two, we can then decide what serves us today. History also, by the way, is not a collection of manuals for correcting the wrongs that were thought to have happened.
Yeah.
They will happen anyway in any history. The point is how to reconcile yourself to historical wrongdoings.
Yeah.
And own up to those that, came your way, because some of the people may be holding an excessive amount of wealth that was captured from other communities. How do you expect peace with those who lost it?
So now, what of the reconciliation? I know that I'm catching you off guard, but what sort of things or processes do you think would best serve us in order to at least start, the conversations around Africans coming back together? Because,
it's a difficult process, but one that's not inhibitive to imagine or even to kickstart. Let me give you an example. There's no one country that is inhabited by only one national stock. Most countries, the British themselves, we forget that they are also tribes. They are the English, the Anglo-Saxons, you can name them. They are different, but they have decided to have a great country, like this tiny country called Great Britain. They themselves had to have great minds and bury the past that is not convenient. Let me take another example close by. The Ndebeles and the Shonas of Zimbabwe. they have a historical plank between themselves, and they cannot have peace without qualification. So somebody has to be bold and say, let's bury the inconvenient past so that we can have a convenient future. You can't have it all.
Yeah.
You can't.
What sort of person would be needed to
That's the difficult part, because the Shonas are not going to listen to Ndebele complaining about what the Shonas are doing wrong to the Ndebeles. The other way around, the Ndebeles will not listen to the Shona who's coming with a hope to find peace. So it needs somebody taller than both sides. But I know within Zimbabwe there are many such people.
Mr. Keineetse, I'm a woman living in Botswana, a patriarchal society, and I'm concerned about the persistent lack of equity in terms of gender relations in the society. A lot of people think that Botswana women are just being babies about it. There's no law in this country that currently prohibits or that promotes men over women. So my question to you is, can I just ask you to tell me what your views on the topic of gender relations in Botswana is?
Well, it's highly skewed to favor men, but as a result, men abscond from a lot of their own responsibilities because culture provides a lot of leeways for them to exit. Though Botswana law and culture had a place reserved for women, clearly, even in terms of properties. For instance, we were cattle herding and crop producing community by and large. But whilst the cattle were supposed to be looked after by men, they served women. They were the traction power for plowing and so on, or even money. They were currency. They were brought first in the home by accepting lobola for the daughters, so that women had a very critical part in the acquisition of family wealth. That also defined their position in the Botswana law. They had property. Our women had property in their own names. Now, when society becomes capitalist, all property is reducible to commodity, and that's where all the devil, the evil started. Okay. So that when you ask about the balance between genders, there's no balance. It's all skewed in favor of men. I have seen a real example of living under such a patriarchy. Children are born in and out of wedlock, and then men are always part of this equation. If they didn't give children, they find children. And often our men will show what stuff they are made of when it comes to bringing up children that are not their own. Today we have a new crime, for instance, of child molestation by people who are ostensibly in loco parenthesis, which means that a father whose hands are washed daily by a girl child is not even looking at that child as daughter. When the child, as a child, doesn't, present herself as a woman because she's still a child, so this man gets ideas, dangerous ideas, and asocial ideas. Hence, this crime of men sleeping with their children. That part has engendered another social dynamic of recklessness, of heartlessness, of brutality and beastliness.
Wow. So when we say that, for instance, about 4 weeks ago or thereabout, the new chairperson of the House of Chiefs was quoted in the papers saying that he was against this new idea taking root in our society that patriarchy is responsible for gender-based violence. Did you see that?
I didn't see the particular comment, but it doesn't come to me as a surprise. The West patriarchs are the defenders of old tradition. They are doing things that are in excess of the provisions of that tradition and culture. All that is now remembered are the residual provisions of the same.
Okay. So what do you think about affirmative action to try to remedy some of this economic disparities, and poverty, which, the women partake the majority of the burden of it?
I am going to introduce in this discussion an idea that's not current. But let's start off by believing, as Marx says, that every class fights for itself. Women in our country must be considered as a class for two reasons. First, their numerical superiority to start with. They are more than half the population. But because they are women, because they all lack a penis, because this is what especially we must start understanding for what women mean on the surface of things. Because they lack a penis, that majority is reduced to the status of a minority. It is not because women are less educated, less trainable, less endowed, not at all. Actually, we may find that there are more women educated in the society than otherwise. But what is the reason to keep them down? First, so you humble them before they are men. So you create a podium, a step on which men can climb to oppress the rest of society. But you know what
podium is that?
Patriarchy. But you know what? A society that oppresses its own women is also oppressing its own children, boys and girls. And then it propagates itself ad infinitum. It cannot end if patriarchy is still dominant. You can change the national constitution, but if you still maintain in the heads and the minds of the living the patriarchal imbalance, the situation will continue.
Do you think that Botswana men are chauvinistic?
I'm a man, sure, and I'm Botswana, and I'm not chauvinistic. Neither am I misogynist. So I think there are men in Botswana who are misogynist, who are, like you say, patriarchal and patriarchally inclined, but that's not all of them. We make a mistake when we take one popular idea, popular or current, and then we universalize it.
If you were for a day, with no offense, just a hypothetical question, if you were a woman for a day and you had to, you think that it is in the best interest of women to stand up for themselves in the society, what are the three things that you might do or help them do?
I like that question. One, I always say to myself, why are women oppressed? I think it is because they lack resolve. And I know 2 weeks in which they can change society. If they decided to cross their legs against all men for 2 weeks, laws will change.
Do you know that in Japan and all these other industrialized countries, there's actually a very strong movement of women who have decided that they're not going to get married, they're not going to have children, and they just do whatever they want to do. They don't acquiesce to men, they don't associate with men in any meaningful way, just because they're trying to say we are ending all these lineages of all these oppressive men and that we're not going to give them children.
I like that, but I know what will happen in Botswana. We will have murder in our streets.
Oh, yeah.
Because our men are so spoiled. If they see a woman's knee, they think they have gained access to her panties.
Just a knee. Yeah. So, I really like where you're going with this. And we need help, okay? A lot of our women don't even know that they're oppressed in this country. And when you have reached a certain level of education, no matter how low it might be, chances are you may have picked up ideas from reading and interactions with others that there's something wrong. But the majority of the women are, it seems to me that they are oblivious to their plight. And that's why I think we end up having the women in the elite class of our society being the ones at the forefront of the so-called women's rights movement, but we don't see the work that they're doing. I was actually somewhat miffed a few days ago because it was the International Women's Day, and I saw so much pageantry in our newspapers, on Facebook and all these other platforms, news platforms, where the elite women have congregated in different localities and quotas and things like that to celebrate International Women's Day.
Excuse me, I must say that it's not just a question of obliviousness. It is a question that women are co-opted to participate in their own long-term oppression. You are mothers, aren't you? You are the people that raise the boy children who will be husbands to your daughters tomorrow.
Yes.
Now, when you raise them, you accept easily the roles, the privileged roles of boys as the love of their fathers. They don't wash your dishes, they don't wash their sisters' panties as the sisters may be asked to do. They are not socialized such that they can replace the bondage of a woman. So I challenge you mothers, say, you are the first port of call for socialization. Socialize your boy children differently, they will not be like their fathers.
Can you help me understand why women seem to equate the call for equity or equality with political positions?
Well, real power resides in the political conundrum, unfortunately. And women are like everybody else, like students going to school. They don't follow a lie, no matter how popular. They follow reality. They know that if you want to be heard, then throw away your panty and wear a men's trousers, because in that realm, only maleness presents itself. To the extent that a woman who comes in as a thank you to her feminist agitation very soon gets converted to being a real woman who will not even listen to the cries of other women.
It kind of hurts me because some women are complicit in our own oppression. And what I've realized is that the old guard in the women's movement in this country are a close-knit group and exclusive.
I will say more. They are not only, they are married to foreigners, almost all of them.
Wow.
That undermines their social relevance position, because when they speak, even in a court, so we have to domesticate the fight for equity. It shouldn't be led by just the school elite, no, just those who have married outside, so they've seen in the light of Plato's allegory of the cave. They've seen light, so they refuse to go back to darkness. And this is how Botswana men are reacting to it all. Oh, it's those girls that have given their panties to foreigners that want to change our society. And then they resist, even for the purposes of change itself.
And what I've also seen is that I've tried to reach out to some of these women. I mean, my organization is as minute as they come. And you always have to acknowledge those who have come before you. And it's like...
They are not anywhere to... No, let me give it to you like this. I was one of those who supported Unity Dow in her landmark case against the state on the right of the citizenship rights of children. And then when she won, I was still enthusiastic about her victory. So I went to her and said, but how do we change this victory of yours into generally a woman's victory? And she was candid. She said, I fought for my children. Any other woman who wants to fight for children's cause may stand up and fight for her own.
Wow.
So it is this attitude, first by some women, but secondly by the general society, that if you make it good, you are making it good just for yourself. You forget about the rest of the community, even those that help you through the difficult part.
And I like what you said. They also get co-opted, because if they are vocal enough, then they get the high positions, and then they become part of the...
This is the way that the Botswana government has dealt with opposition. Look at how they recruit. They recruit members from across the East who are problematic to them. And once those members cross over, then they are the hunting dogs of the incumbent government against the same opposition from which they've come. It's just playing one against the other.
Okay, let me just switch up. About 15 or 20 years ago, during the reign of President Mogai, there was an unprecedented numbers of local Botswana children going outside Botswana to study in the world's universities.
It was increased during Ian Khama's reign.
Yeah,
my daughter went in the batch of Ian Khama.
Okay.
But you are right.
Yeah.
Many children were going outside.
But during Ian Khama's time, we saw, I think they tried to put a cap on the numbers leaving the country, and that's why we have, all these new universities that suddenly
emerged.
Yeah, emerged in the country. So we have all the, all sorts of
retainees.
Yeah, and they come home to no jobs, no economy to speak of, and it kind of hurts my feelings that all those government, the taxpayers' money has gone to waste.
Yeah.
What do you think the problem is? And have you yourself studied outside Botswana?
I've not studied out of Botswana for choice. I went out temporarily or a short course in France, but that was it. I wanted to study in Botswana, but because I knew my study would lead to a problematic personality for this government, and I didn't want to be dismissed easily as they did with the likes of Marilady Gidi, OK Minyatso, Klaas Mutsidisi, Lenyele Tsokoma, who were said to have been indoctrinated in the Soviet Union with nihilist philosophies and revolutionary dogmas. I didn't want that for myself. But the point you were asking about joblessness has to do with the very idea of education. In the past, before we went to school education, we still had education, by the way, from the mountain school. But that school taught people to integrate in society, to become useful members of society. Our new education shows us that we pursue a diploma, we pursue certificates, which necessarily have to send our children outside our own borders, outside the society that they are being educated for, to get some skill. Unfortunately, when they do come back, we don't have money to employ them because in this economy, we do not plow back the profit. Instead, we are creaming off the profit, sending it to tax havens where it generates a proper dollar at the expense of where the money has come from. It's making private money, private profit for the individuals that keep it there, the investors so-called in the country. But that means there's no money retained within the country to further develop or even generate more employment.
Some people feel that foreign direct investment is colonialism packaged differently.
I'll say in one word, it's a chimera. It's something that we will look for all our lives, but that we'll never see. We cannot have people investing in foreign places, especially when they ask the following questions. Has your country ever changed government? And the answer had been no until recently. Investors are wise. They know if you don't change government, there will be an explosion. They don't want to put their money at risk.
A lot of African politicians, especially in South Africa, see Botswana as some sort of an outcast and a footstool, like they usually say, the footstool of, the second wave of American or British imperialism.
Yes. Why would they see it otherwise? We are hosting here in Botswana, Maparangwane, for everybody's information, an air base that is by way above the needs of our economy. It has planes we cannot even fly, systems that we don't even know how to operate. It is there to serve American foreign policy. So we have agreed to host the policemen in our land. And the rest of Southern Africa that is progressively turning bricks is bound to worry because we are the only NATO country. And what do you know of NATO? What have we seen of NATO? From Ukraine to Palestine, We know what NATO does. It hates peace.
But I thought that Zambia is the one that had the AFRICOM command center or whatever base.
Command may be in Lusaka, but the air base, the springboard for aggression, is in our country.
But don't you remember when, okay, I understand you clearly said that it is beyond our
economic need. Yeah.
But I remember I saw in the Hansard many years ago when I was a journalist that the Botswana government actually funded that air base.
Well, that was during the days of Merafi. Merafi was a soldier. His boss was a soldier. So soldiers thinking just militarily, especially then when it was not a thing that you could take for granted that the Boers will collapse, and if they would collapse, they would not have triggered a war between the Xhosas and the Zulus. Then Merafi may have had a point in just saying, if in case things go bad, they shouldn't go so bad that we are not able to lift a finger. But beyond the hoped for confrontation of the South Africans against South Africans, personally, I think there's no need for Maparamani Air Base. It's only there to draw the attention of our neighbors. Besides, why does Africa need more arms today when we are supposed to be enjoying the windfall of peace? Who's preparing war with who?
Okay, I kind of understand. And, you know, it is somewhat disheartening to realize that there is truth to that. Because in my head, I was thinking, I know that the Botswana government funded this airbase. And, you know, in my mind, I've always thought, because Ian Khama, the man that he is an airman. Yeah. He likes flying. And maybe they did this back when America was not such a threat to African nations. And that doesn't put us in a good spot. So how are we supposed to participate in the integration conversations or even actions when people see us?
We are the whore of Southern Africa, the Saudi Arabia of her place this day.
Is Botswana a puppet of the West or the Western nations?
Well, to say puppet is to make an understatement. We are the floor mop.
Wow. How do we get out of that? Do we have a choice?
Well, ask yourself. Traore kicked in Burkina Faso. The Nigerian men kicked. You can't get freedom without fighting for it. And if you fight for peace and freedom, you fight till your last.
Now, can you just quickly tell us what you think of this new Trump administration? What do you think Putin will do? What do you think is going to happen?
Let me hazard a thought. First, by looking at American society. The Americans are proper capitalists and they want to stay at the helm of that system. This is why they elect a clearly ex-slave owner to become president of their country, because that is the pedigree that runs the economy. One, how that government, how Trump in his reincarnation will treat the world. I think I am better disposed to Trump now than I was to Joe Biden, because Joe Biden, whatever he had up his sleeve, only himself knew. He was like that African son, Obama, who killed more American enemies than anybody else. Trump will not go out to do a major war. Biden has done that for him. He's emptied the national armory of American arms producers. So Trump is going to go along the peace lines. He will talk better to Putin because it seems at that level they are personal friends. And you see, America, when they talk enemy, they talk Russia all the time, since the First World War.
China.
Yeah. So they will, Trump will push for economic competition, not the military one, because, you know, the armories are empty. And Putin has shown that the whole of NATO will find it a difficult mountain climb to annihilate.
What do you think is the future of Botswana?
We have to decide now what that future is going to be. we can either be a peacemaking country, tourist welcoming people, a richer community of greater social equity, and a happier place to be in.
I like that.
The Dutch have a bit of that. How they made it, I don't know. But when you leave the Schiphol...
By being non-aligned, but now
Yes.
it looks like we are beginning to...
We're looking for owners. We are like a freed slave who cannot spend a day of his freedom alone.
Wow. I felt that, and it just went straight into my heart. So, you know, this has been a very illuminating conversation. I enjoyed it thoroughly, and I'll just take this time to give you a minute to say your final thoughts.
Well, I'm myself super excited by this. I thought the kind of questionnaire that you put before me would not be coming my way anytime soon, because I despair about modern scholarship. It's all vanity, it's all gloss on the surface, but totally no depth to reach down to. So you have excited me, and you make me feel there's value in still pursuing academy.
Thank you so very much. That's all we have for you today, folks. Look forward to the next Selalelo program coming up soon.